So this week, Challenger Srt Hellcat Redeye.
When you have the red key, you unlock all the horsepower basically.
So this week, Challenger Srt Hellcat Redeye. So where exactly the Redeye stand in the Challenger lineup? So now these days the Challenger's got a pretty diverse lineup. It starts from the V6 all the way up to the Demon. So where exactly stand the Redeye? So let's start with the V6. That's the base model you can get with the Challenger. Then you can step up to the V8 model with the RT and also the 392 models. And there's also other models really popular, the Scat Pack and all that, you can get with the Challenger. Then you can step up to the Hellcat with 707 horsepower. Then in the Hellcat lineup, you can get the Redeye. With the Redeye, you can step up to the 797 horsepower. And then you got the Demon. The Demon is really a track focus for the drag strip kind of model. It's also a collector edition, really rare. It just raises up in value every year. So the Demon is a top of the line in the Challenger and also the rarest. How can you tell it's a Redeye model and not the Hellcat model? First of all, the hood is different. On this one, you've got that dual ram air intake, really nice hood, functional also. If we go on the side of the Redeye, you can tell by these wheels. These wheels are unique to the Redeye model. And then we can tell by the logo, obviously. This one's it's wearing the Hellcat logo, but you can tell by the eye it's a Redeye. So it's a Hellcat Redeye. So little tiny little things, but you can tell it's a Redeye. And also, you know, just by the stance of this car, you can get the wide body also with the Hellcat, but this one's got the wide body also, so it's wider, larger stand also. It gives a really nice look to that Challenger. Speaking of the look and the design of the Challenger, Dodge really kept the retro look for the Challenger, and I really like that look. I like the retro. You can tell this is a Challenger and it's inspired by the old Challengers from the 70s, especially with the plum crazy color. Also the paint brings back the typical color from the classic Mopar, with that combo also with the matte black hood, matte black spoiler. I really dig that look. It looks great. It really matched here the surrounding of the headlights and also the chin spoiler in the front. If we step on the side again, as you can tell, the wide body gives that really large stand to the Hellcat Redeye with those matching wheels. Completes the look with the hood and the spoiler. On the side, you got that typical muscle car shape, but you can tell this car is larger, longer than any of the Camaros or Mustang. And in the back, get that large trunk with that wonderful spoiler, really retro look again. This is called the Barracuda spoiler. I really dig that look. It looks like those classic Plymouth Cuda. And also the rear end, you know, again, really retro, really classic. And this is really where you get the classic retro look from Dodge, and this is where you see the big difference now these days between muscle car. And for me, you know, I want to really stress out, this is one of the last true remaining muscle car. The Mustang these days and the Camaro are more sport cars. They're more focused on the handling and the performance, and this is all about comfort, practicality with the trunk, and also a big wide stance, comfort, big power. This is all the recipe to the classic muscle car and not a sport car. All right, now let's talk about the heart of the Hellcat Redeye, the engine. This is really what makes the Redeye. It's the engine. So when you're buying a Hellcat, you get 707 horsepower, but with the Redeye, you get 797 horsepower from a V8 6.2 liter supercharged. And this is a big supercharger. This is a 2.7 liter supercharger. Supercharger is one of the largest you can buy from factory. It's also one of the loudest, for my opinion, from factory. The noise who's coming out of that supercharger is just wonderful when you drive it. So a couple things you can notice with the Hellcat Redeye engine. Have you got that big intake directly feeding that supercharger? On top of that, you've got the ram air who's gonna give you extra air from the hood. You get those two entrants of air in the hood who's directly, you know, put that air into the intake. On top of that, for feeding that cold air intake, you've got those direct tube in the headlight. You can see this is not a headlight, this is these parts light up, but here it goes directly feeding air to the intake. You can do the same with the other headlight here. If you go to the racetrack, you do some drag racing. This one is not open right now, but it's an option. You can open it in the back. Just open it up. A pretty cool feature also about that engine. This engine used the air conditioning to inject it directly in the cold air system, in the intake. So reduce the temperature of the air inside of the intake by 10 degrees Celsius. So this is good for the engine, you know, it brings that cold air, more dense air, feeding that supercharger. It's a pretty cool thing, especially if you're at the track, at the drag strip. Sometimes it gets really hot. After a couple of passes, your engine is getting warmer and warmer. So with that AC system injecting cold air in the air, with that system, you're keeping your performance always at the same level. So the engine is one of the main difference between the Hellcat model and the Hellcat Redeye. The Hellcat models get 707 horsepower and the Redeyes get 797 horsepower and 707 foot-pounds of torque. The Redeye share the same engine as the Demon. The Demons get 808 horsepower, and you can get up to 840 horsepower with the other computer who comes with the crate. But that's 840 horsepower is available only with race gas. So, you know, this is one of the main difference between the Hellcat and the Redeye. The supercharger is also bigger on the Redeye. So you've got plenty of power. This is coupled to a 8-speed transmission, a pretty strong transmission. One thing also, the Redeye and also the Demon only comes with the automatics. There's no manual available, you know, for that amount of power, especially if you do some drag racing. You know, it's always better to use automatic, but it will be fun to drive 800 horsepower with a manual transmission. All right, stepping in the back of the Challenger, one of the main feature, a big plus for the Challenger compared to the Camaro or the Mustang, it's really the trunk. You've got a huge trunk. You know, this week I've used that trunk to do my groceries with no issues. You got plenty of space. This is the largest trunk you can get in that, you know, category of sport car, muscle car, I can tell. You know, it's really daily friendly. You can do your groceries, you can travel with it. Lately, you know, during my other reviews, I did a road trip with the Camaro, and unfortunately my luggage wouldn't fit in that tiny trunk. Had to put that luggage in the rear seats. So again, it's a big plus for the Challenger having that big trunk. All right, stepping inside of the Challenger, first of all, you know, is those seats. Those seats are really comfortable. You've got a lot of support, and they're made for big guys like me. When you're sitting inside of a Mustang with the Recaro seats, they're really narrow for bigger guys like me. So this interior, those seats are really made for wide guys, big guys, so I can sit really comfortably. I still got a lot of support, you know, in the curves and all that. I don't really move. Obviously, if you're skinnier, smaller, maybe you're gonna move in those big seats. But if you're bigger, you've been sitting inside of a Mustang, you were like, those seats are too narrow, I wouldn't drive it for a couple of hours. This is a big plus for those seats. They're really comfortable, and it's a big plus for me. If we're looking inside of the Challenger, the style, you know, it's classic, nothing really complicated, but it looks good. You can see there's an angle to the driver. I like that shifter. It reminds me of the Hearst shifter back in the day in the drag racing. As you can tell, you can shift your transmission manually with the shifter, or either with the paddle shifter here on the steering wheel. You know, a clean interior. I got plenty of space. I can drive this Challenger with my boots, just to tell you the truth, you know. Probably, you know, I wouldn't be able to drive the Camaro or the Mustang with my boots. I wouldn't, maybe not fit. But here it's a bigger car for a bigger guy like me, so it's a big plus. All right, also the steering wheel, you know, got good grips on it. One thing, I don't really like that plastic part on the steering wheel. It feels kind of cheap, you know. For a car whose MSRP is $117, I would expect some higher quality and details on the steering wheel. But otherwise, you know, heated steering wheel, heated seats, you get that kind of like silver carbon finish here surrounding the infotainment. Speaking of the infotainment, this one works really well. It's the same one you can find in all the FCA products these days. Here you can see it's really easy to use. It's the same thing. Here you got your radio. You got your climate, your app, your controls. You see it's really fast also, responding really fast to all my touches. And on top of that, what I really like is the Srt Mode. As we can see here, there's multiple modes. That's the Eco mode, if you want to save fuel. When you're in Sport mode, you unlock all the horsepower with the red key, obviously. So you can see the power here, 797. You can put in track, so everything's become red. As you can see, the engine, transmission, suspension, everything. When you put it in auto, that puts like the regular mode. Once again, you can do custom mode. Though this week I'm really riding with full power, but traction wise, you know, I'm using street. So it's a little bit cold outside, you know, during this time of the year. So I'm a little bit careful. There's a bunch of options, race option. You can see there's your launch control, the RPM. You can set your RPM. All these, you know, are really helpful when you do some drag racing. Here you get some more details with your line lock. If you wish to warm up your tire a little bit, the line lock is there. A pretty cool thing I like about the interior of the Hellcat Redeye, it's those red seat belts. I think it looks fantastic. It's really cool with the seats. And on top of that, you know, you can really use those rear seats. I've been testing those rear seats this week with the kids. They can sit comfortable. Plenty of space to be sit in the back, space for the legs, their feet and all that. And this is not the case with models like the Mustang and the Camaro. Telling you the truth, in the Mustang or the Camaro, you're not able to use those rear seats. But it's not the case in the Challenger. Yes, this Challenger is larger, bigger, wider, longer, heavier. But, you know, even if these can be a disadvantage performance-wise, handling-wise against the Mustang and the Camaro, it's a big advantage for the space, and using that Challenger on the daily basis is more practical and friendly. All right, inside of the Hellcat Redeye, you know, I've been really surprised this week by this Challenger. You know, it's the first time, you know, really spending a lot of time with the Challenger. So for me, I drove several other models before, but really spending a full week the Challenger on a daily basis. It's really my first time spending that much time with a Challenger. And you know, I spent a lot of time also with Mustang and Camaros, way much more than the Challenger. And overall, it's hard to compare the Challenger with the Camaro and the Mustang, because you know the Camaro and the Mustangs are really, you know, a head-to-head, same kind of car, same kind of size, same kind of engine. The Challenger is way bigger, way larger, way longer, and way heavier too. But it's not a bad thing, you know. I really like the way this car ride. It's really comfortable. Those seats are made for guys like me. They're large, comfortable, but you got a lot of support. And on the road, especially because this one's a wide body, you've got those wide tires, that wide stance. On the road is just wonderful. Right now I'm driving in country roads in Quebec, and you know, the way this car feels, it's truly like a grand touring car, like a big Mercedes-Benz coupe, BMW, or a Continental GT. This car feels like those kind of cars. It doesn't feel like a sport car like a Mustang or Camaro. So on the road, you know, it feels fantastic. It's really made to drive those long distance, go on a road trip, even going in, you know, roads like the one I'm driving right now. It's comfortable for all kind of roads. Speaking of wide stance, that's something I really like about the Challenger wide body. You know, when I used to own a Mustang, I used to have a square stance. What I mean by a square stance, it's the tires in the front and the tires in the back are the same size. So on this wide body Hellcat, they are 305 in the front and also in the back. Good thing with that setup, your car is really more stable, it's really large, and also you can rotate your tires. That's a good thing for the Hellcat, because it loves to burn those rear tires in the back easy and quickly. So it's always good to have being able to do a rotation of tires, so you can save some cost on the tires. But you know, the down point of having really large tires in the front, it's really while you're parking or there's some groove of big trucks in the road. Love that grip you've got in the front. You need those really wide tires in the front because you got that heavy front end from that heavy engine with that heavy supercharger on top of it. So you know, driving the wide body, if you have to choose Hellcat or Hellcat Redeye, you know, don't even look at the other Challenger. You need that wide body in your life. So how is it to drive Hellcat Redeye with 797 horsepower? You know, it's pretty friendly. Obviously, I'm used to drive high horsepower and muscle cars, but still, you know, there's so much setting you can put the car in. You need to respect the car and respect your abilities to drive. So if you're not used to high horsepower, you can tone it down with 500 horsepower. Then you can unlock it to 797. This car came with two kind of key. There's a black key. So with the black key, you're stuck at 500 horsepower. And when you have the red key, you unlock all the horsepower basically. But otherwise, you know, it's easier to drive than a Corvette Z06. I could say it's you know, it's more stable, more friendly to drive, easier to shift also. When the rear end comes loose, because the car is longer, it's easier to control your rear end. So on that point, you know, this car is not that difficult to drive. And also in
bad weathers. You know, right now, you know, I'm in Canada, so it's pretty cold outside. Not the ideal condition for 797 horsepower, but and when you put it in eco mode, it tones down everything. Even if it was raining a lot, really cold, in the eco mode, it would be drivable like any other cars. But one thing I really like about the Challenger, when you put the Hellcat on the SRT mode, you can play with all the modes like usually you can find in all new performance cars. But what I really like is when you press on custom, you can really play with that car. So for example, me, I really like having a really hard steering wheel, track style. I like to use a paddle shifter, having a really sharp transmission, having all the horsepower. I like putting everything in track, you know, even if I'm on the road. But you know, it's cold right now, the tires don't have all the traction I would like to have, so I put the traction on street mode, not on sport, not on track, so it keeps me on the road. It doesn't, the rear end doesn't come loose as it will be on track mode, so it's more safer, but I still can have some fun and having an aggressive car to drive. Another big plus for the Hellcat Redeye, you know, these cars are pretty rare. They're pretty expensive too. This one I'm driving this week's $117,000 Canadian. It starts around 93, but still, it's an expensive car. But the thing is, if you take care of it and you have a good packaging like the one I'm driving this week, with the flat black hood, the Barracuda spoiler, the white body and all that, this Challenger won't really lose money over time, and maybe if you keep it for a couple of years or more, it will gain in value. So this is always a big plus when you purchase these kind of cars. Overall, you know, I was really surprised driving the Challenger. I like the way, you know, it drives. If you were asking me which car to take on a road trip between the three muscle cars, you know, I would choose the Challenger. It's the most comfortable, ride-wise, seat-wise, and all that. You know, for me, the Challenger is the last true muscle car. It's bigger, it's larger. You can sit four inside of it. You've got a real trunk. So for me, this is the true recipe of a muscle car, and the Mustang and the Camaro are really sport cars. So after driving all these cars this summer, you know, I drove pretty much all the Camaros. I drove the Mustang GT, I drove the Challenger, and now I drove pretty much all the big boys, the Redeye, the ZL1 1LE, and also I'm waiting to drive the Shelby GT500 2020 model. I would like to make my mind which one is the best. You know, I think for a daily usage, the Redeye is number one. If you do some track time, the ZL1 1LE is just a beast. You know, if you were putting the Redeye against the ZL1 1LE on a circuit, the ZL1 1LE would probably lap the Redeye easily. So can't wait to drive the GT500. I'm a big Shelby fan, so I can't wait to drive that new GT500.